And we obviously made them at the same time. Okay. Welcome back to Fiat Lux. My name is Anna.
I'm Justin.
And we're talking about relationships today. This video is all about being single. I have been single for 19 years of my life, and honestly, it took me that long to be genuinely happy being single. And I don't regret it at all. I think it was super important for me, kind of laid the foundation for entering into a relationship. I remember kind of thinking to myself that I would just be different in a relationship somehow, that like the problems that I had, the struggles that I had would just kind of go away or get better. But that's not the case at all. The flaws that I had when I was single, the restlessness that I experienced are all things that carry over into a relationship. But with that being said, also the virtue that I developed, the practice of selflessness and sacrifice and discipline have all also carried over. I know how difficult it can be to be single, and I know relationships are great, and that's something that is natural for us to crave. I also know that it's just as beautiful a time of your life as any other. If you're single and watching this, I want to share what I've learned from my time as a single person and from then entering into a relationship. We have 8 tips for you about how to prepare for a relationship while you are still single. And of course, this is if this is the Lord's will for your life, which we'll get into that later.
So our first tip is to pray for your future spouse. Just because you don't know who they are or if there will be someone doesn't mean that you can't pray for them. God will not waste any prayer. So pray for them to find what is best, pray for what's best for them, pray for yourself.
And also offer up sacrifices and sufferings that you experience for their sake. That's a very powerful form of prayer.
Yeah, just because your relationship hasn't started yet doesn't mean that you can't start preparing for it, and prayer is one of the best ways to do that.
So the next tip I have is to practice self-denial. This is something that is a huge part of relationships. Whether that be with practicing chastity or just being patient with fill in the blank or missing someone, you're going to have to get good at giving up the things that you want and learning how to accept sacrifice. While you're single, that might look like going out of your way to serve other people. It might look like exercising and taking care of yourself, making little extra sacrifices, fasting, cold showers, things like that, to really practice that discipline and exercise that muscle.
So she talked a little bit about self-denial and chastity. So something that this leads into really nicely is emotional chastity.
So emotional chastity is about guarding your heart and saving parts of your heart for a time when it's appropriate to be given to someone else.
So this is something that's really hard to do, especially when you're single and you are looking for a potential spouse, because you tend to look for a potential spouse in everyone you meet. So, you know, every guy that walks in your class, you're rating them on this evaluation scale of like, oh, could I see myself with them forever, before you even know their name, that kind of idea. That's what you want to stay away from. When you're meeting new guys, meeting new girls, practice emotional chastity and try not to see them as a potential future spouse, but as a son or daughter of Christ. And see how can you love them as that, and how can you work up a friendship before you start considering that kind of area. If what I just said describes you really well and you're constantly looking for your future spouse, or also if you've been in and out of a lot of relationships and you're not finding happiness, something that you can do that is really helpful, which I personally did myself in college, it's called a dating fast. So what this is, it's sort of like a fast, like what you would do for Lent, where you're giving up certain food or a habit or something, and you are applying it to dating. So during your dating fast, which you can pick however long you want to do, you could do 40 days like Lent, you could do, I did 6 months, some people do a year, however much time that you think you need. So what does a dating fast look like? Well, during that set time that you decide, you're basically not going to be looking for a spouse. That means not only are you not going to be dating people, but you're also not going to be looking at people as potential dates. So any women that you meet, any guys that you meet, you're just going to work on building up friendships with them, and you're not going to be nurturing a romantic kind of relationship. So you can set that time and you're going to hold yourself accountable, get a couple friends to hold you accountable and say, during this window of time, I'm off the market. Because a lot of people will say, oh, you know, well, I've been single for X many years, but during that time, has your heart taken the time to really be single, or has it been constantly seeking after another person? During a dating fast is basically a time to be single by choice, not by circumstance. And during that time, you can really work on growing yourself in your relationship with Christ, because you're not going to have that distraction of that emotional chastity pull, or lack of emotional chastity pull that's saying, who can I end up with? Who can I talk to? Who can I get to know? Who can I go on a date with? Like, that stuff is good and it has its place, but not before your heart is ready for it.
I want to ask you a question too, Justin. Like, how did you know when you were ready again?
Well, I had decided on 6 months, and by the end of that 6 months, I had grown and learned more about myself than I ever really had before. I mean, it was fantastic, and I realized that I was just kind of starved for something that I was seeking in relationships. And it was so beneficial to me that by the end of that 6 months, I decided to extend it another 6 and go a full year. And by the end of that year, I just felt like I was in such a better place than before. I had taken a full year to not even consider relationships and take it completely off the table, single by choice. I just learned and grew and knew a lot about myself, and just through sitting with that and prayer and that growth, and I came to a place where I said, yeah, I'm ready to start giving this a try again and to see it in a new light.
And if you're struggling with whether or not you want to do something like that, I would encourage you to just take a second to think about, what if your future spouse is considering something like that right now? Would you want them to go for it? Would you want them to take that time to really learn peace and joy and to get solid with God? I'm sure that you would want that for them. I think that we should become the caliber of person that we want to marry. That if you want to end up with someone who has come to a really good place in their faith and relationship with God, that you should also really try to live that out yourself.
Yeah, and don't go half into it either. Don't say, yeah, I'm going to be on a dating fast for 6 months, but, if I meet a nice guy 3 months in, I'll just call it off, it's fine. Make sure you commit to it fully. If you meet that nice guy and he's going to be the one, then he'll be there when you get out of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, your future spouse might be dating another guy right now. All things will happen in the right time, as God's plan falls into place. So when you decide on that time, trust in God and commit to it and stick through it to the end.
Building off of Justin's last point, it's just the idea of building virtue, whether that be emotional chastity, self-denial, and other things such as kindness, generosity, wisdom. Really take this time to grow in virtue, work on yourself with God in whatever ways He wants you to.
So I think something that kind of leads into this stuff and would be good to bring up now, and this may be hard to hear for some people, also be open to the fact that marriage may not be what you're called to. This is something that's very good to mull over while you're doing a dating fast if you choose to do one. We grow up, and we watch our parents, and we learn all about marriage, and we put it kind of on this pedestal, but marriage should not be a default option. It should be something that you pray about and you discern, and through the grace of God, eventually choose to do. But don't rule out that He could be calling you to priesthood, religious life, consecrated single life, which is something that a lot of people don't know about. So look into these other things and pray about it and consider it, but don't just say, I'm going to get married because I've always wanted to get married. Make sure that it's something that you're discerning properly.
And I would even argue that it's actually difficult to have a very healthy, very holy relationship if you're completely closed off to the possibility of any other vocation.
Yeah, I mean, really, even up until the moment that you say your vows, you should be open to a different call. I mean, both of us are open right now to being called into priesthood or
religious life.
Yeah, the nun thing. But it could happen. I've known people who were in a committed, serious relationship, and then he felt the call to be a priest, and he left that relationship. She completely understood, and eventually she became a nun herself. So God may have some amazing, beautiful plan for you or your spouse that you're considering, and so don't close off yourself to that, and also for their sake, don't close off that idea, because God may call them.
And I get it, it's really hard. I've always really wanted to be married, but the truth is that God is the only one who can fulfill you and satisfy you, which brings us to the next points.
Keep Jesus as your source of happiness. It's really important that He is the one and only source for true joy in your life. Now, He wants you to have these things like a relationship, these good things, and He's going to work through those to bring you happiness and joy. But none of these things should be a replacement for Him. You should love Him above all else. So when you're looking for a spouse, you don't want to find somebody who is going to make you happy just based on themselves. And what I mean by that is people are going to let you down. There is nobody that you are going to enter into a relationship with who at some point isn't going to hurt you. You are going to get hurt in that relationship because, we're broken. And that's okay. You love that person through it and you forgive them and you apologize if you're the one on the other end. But a relationship should not be about finding somebody who's going to be your source of happiness. It should be about somebody who's going to point you toward the source of happiness. You're looking for somebody to walk beside you facing a common goal, not someone that you're going to face and close off Jesus to, because that will never bring you true happiness.
That's way too much pressure to put on someone in a relationship. If you're going to set yourself up to have expectations that are completely unreasonable and will leave you feeling empty and restless. So that brings me to the next point, which is about having realistic expectations for marriage and remembering that marriage and relationships are very challenging. Something that helped me when I was single was thinking about actually the difficult parts of being in a relationship and realizing that it wasn't all going to be sunshine and roses and that there were going to be aspects of it that would be extremely difficult. This could be something such as keeping in mind that planning a wedding can be stressful and difficult, or having children is very hard, or
sharing your space with someone else,
yeah.
your time.
My point is, yes, marriage is beautiful and relationships are a gift, and they are not a fantasy. They are real, and that's what makes them beautiful, but that's what makes right now beautiful as well.
And so that brings up another really good point, is enjoy your time being single. It's always really easy, while you're single to say, oh man, I want to be in a relationship so bad. But sometimes when you're in a relationship, you miss being single, so really enjoy that time, because, the grass is always greener on the other side, that kind of mentality. You always miss what you didn't have. When you get into a relationship, and potentially a very long-term, rest of your life kind of relationship, you're going to go pretty much the rest of your life without being single. That time that you're single is truly a gift, and you have all this time to do things that you want to do and to work on yourself, and that time is going to be shared with another person, and someday multiple persons, children, not polygamy.
You may be living with your parents or your siblings right now, and that's a gift that you really might not have all that much longer in the grand span of your life. So something to not take for granted and to appreciate, to invest with those people while you have the chance, to try and make a lasting impact on them and be there for them. Being with your girlfriends, you might have a lot more time for that right now, or hang out with guys. That might be something that you're able to evangelize to them, answer their phone calls at any given moment when they really need you. That's a beautiful thing that you may not always have the ability to do. Well, that is all of our tips for you guys. I hope that you found it helpful.
I found it helpful.
What should they do, Justin?
They should like this video and subscribe to this channel and hit the little notification bell so that you get stuff delivered to your inbox. And you should comment. You should comment another tip that we missed. You should comment your favorite tip.
Comment your favorite thing about being single, if you're single.
Or if you're not.
That's
comment what you miss most from being single.
We love each other. We're happy here too.
This is not a cry for help. This is just an advice video.
And as always, let's go light up the world.